All right, it's so great to see you all today. For those of you who are joining us online, we welcome you. You're a part of what's going on here, even though you're watching from home or wherever you might be. Today, we are in week 4 of our series, The Art of Adulting. We're going to end this series next week. I hope you'll be here for that. But I've been curious, how are we doing? Are we kind of wrapping our heads around this? Are we all on the same page? Are we getting it together? And I thought, what better way to test that out than just to do a pop quiz this morning. So here's our pop quiz. Can you remember what our series thesis is? Love atones for, one guy got it. Love atones for sin, wisdom avoids it. And this is based on our theme verse. Do you remember what it is? It comes from the book of Proverbs, 16:6. Can you say it with a few of the words missing? Through love and faithfulness. Through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord, evil is avoided. Throughout this series, we've tried to emphasize this word right here. It means to miss the mark. Whenever biblical writers say sin, they mean missing the mark. And we've seen this, right? This is bigger than just making a mistake. It's more significant than that. When we miss the mark, we find ourselves caught in a tangled mess of moral consequences that drag us down and negatively impact the people we love and the people who love us. And it's by the life and the death of Jesus on the cross and his resurrection that we can be set free. He paid the price for our sin so that we can be atoned for, and that means one person pays so that somebody else can be free. And then the fear of the Lord is the on-ramp to wisdom, and this doesn't mean to be scared. It means that we revere him. It means that we are in awe of him, and because he set us free, and we are so in awe of him, and we love him, and we're grateful to him, we want to live a life aligned in wisdom. And so here's our final pop quiz question. We've been reading through Proverbs 8 each week, trying to digest a chunk at a time, and wisdom is personified as what? As a woman, that's right. And she's a lady. And because she's a lady, she will invite us, but she's not going to impose herself on us. And so let's jump in. We're going to close out Proverbs 8 today. This is what wisdom says to us. Now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Do not disregard it. Every single one of us, we've got a choice and a vulnerability. You have a choice and a vulnerability, and so do I. We get to decide for ourselves, what are we going to do with the instruction that wisdom offers? But our vulnerability is this: to the degree that there is pride in you and me, to the degree that there is pride in us, to that same degree, we are enemies of wisdom. And so if it's all right, let me just ask a personal, vulnerable question. What are you doing to make war against the pride in you? What are you doing to make war against the stuff inside of you that would cause you to disregard wisdom? She continues, blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. People who pursue wisdom, they are active, they are not passive. They don't just hope it comes by them, they chase after it. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. And those who hate me love death. And regardless of whatever your spiritual background might be, regardless of whatever your viewpoint on the Bible might be, this is one of the reasons that I think we should all sit up and take notice and give it our attention, because it does such a phenomenal job of clarifying the relationship between our choices and outcomes, our choices and consequences. The Bible makes consequences understandable and predictable so that those consequences can be avoided. Ignoring biblical wisdom comes with unavoidable consequences. But embracing biblical wisdom comes with an unbelievable gift. And this is the gift, the art of adulting. This is the way we're describing wisdom, to understand and skillfully engage with the full spectrum of reality. Who doesn't want more of this? We all want more of this. So why aren't more people enjoying more wisdom? If you missed out on last week's message, please go back and watch it online. It really is the prequel for what we're going to talk about today. But one of the things we covered last week is this: wisdom comes with a cost. And some people just choose not to pay it. You and I, we are free to be fools. But being a fool is not free. It will cost us, It costs the people we love, and it'll cost the people who love us. This is our recap of last week. The only thing more costly than choosing wisdom is not choosing it. Do you believe that? The only thing more costly than choosing wisdom is not choosing it. This is where we ended last week, and this is where I want to take off from today. And so if this is wisdom to understand and skillfully engage with the full spectrum of reality, we got to ask this: what do adults need to understand? Now, there's probably a lot to that answer, but today I want to hit one thing on the list. Adults understand that all goals require giving up freedoms and taking on constraints. Adults understand that all goals require giving up our freedoms and taking on constraints. Please do not interpret that politically. This is not a political statement. This is a practical statement. Just pick anything you want in life, anything you want to go after, any goal you want. You're going to have to give up some freedoms and take on some constraints. Anybody got education goals? If you got education goals, you got to give up the freedom to enjoy luxuries like sleep and take on the constraints of studying. If you got weight loss goals, you got to give up the freedom to eat what you want, when you want, and take on healthy constraints. If you've got relationship goals, and I hope you do, actually, this is how we're closing out the series next week. Come back for that. We're going to talk about relationships. Let me say this. If you want to enjoy a healthy relationship with somebody else, you're going to have to give up some freedoms and take on the constraints required to love that person. I love how Pastor Tim Keller really just makes this clear. He says this: you can either sacrifice your freedom or theirs. It's your freedom or theirs. You can sacrifice your freedom or theirs. It's them or you. To love your children well, you must decrease that they may increase. You must be willing to enter into the dependency they have so eventually they can experience the freedom and independence you have. All life-changing love toward people with serious needs is a substitutional sacrifice. So let me put this back up on the screen. Adults understand that all goals require giving up freedoms and taking on constraints. People who don't understand this will never be able to skillfully engage with what it takes to get from where they are to where they want to be. People who don't understand this will never be able to skillfully engage with all that's required to actualize or achieve a goal they have. People who don't understand this can never have an adult relationship with their goals in life. So let's bring it in. Let's make it personal. Let's put the spotlight on ourselves. How are we doing with wisdom? Let me ask this question. Is our church paying the price for choosing wisdom? Or are we paying the price for not choosing wisdom? The challenging part of answering this question is there are multiple ways that we can approach it. We could approach it organizationally. You could ask, is our church leadership paying the price of wisdom? Do our church leaders understand and skillfully engage with all that's required to lead a church well? It's one of the reasons that we have an annual meeting that's coming up on February 6th, and we invite you to participate in that. It's going to be great. I want you to be here. And you get to ask questions. I'd love it if you'd ask your questions early. Send them in early. It helps us give you better answers and make sure that everybody's questions are answered. Be a part of that. It's a big deal. But today, instead of trying to answer this organizationally, I'd like for us to wrestle with it individually. Because all of our answers, including those of you who watch online, all of our answers combine and contribute to what Autumn Ridge Church's answer is collectively. And I hope this isn't annoying, but before we can answer this question, I think we have to ask and answer another question. What does an adult relationship with church look like? And to answer this question, I want to read a verse from Proverbs that might surprise some of us. And I don't know the first time that I ever read it, but I can tell you the first time I noticed it, I was in my 20s. It stopped me in my tracks. It blew me away, knocked me off my feet. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration. What I'm going to say next is not an exaggeration. This verse changed my life. Are you ready to hear it? Where there are no oxen, the stable stays clean, but from the strength of an ox comes an abundant harvest. You know what I'm talking about, right? You can see why that would change my life. What is this talking about? What is this verse really talking about? If you grew up around animals, you can smell the answer. Is this right here? You want a large harvest? Grab a shovel and scoop. I don't know anybody who loves this. We love the harvest. We love achieving the outcome that we're aiming for. We love achieving the goal. We don't always love everything that's necessary that we have to deal with to get there. And so here's a facet of wisdom that we just got to wrestle down today. Adults love the harvest more than they hate the work. And adopting this mindset, making the decision to make this our mindset, that is a personal decision, but it is not private. So much of Proverbs is written as advice from a father to a son, and while it's directed to his son personally, we would be misunderstanding it if we did not see the bigger picture. The message that the father is trying to get across to his son is your response to this, whether or not you embrace this mindset, it impacts more people than you can name, more people than you can count. This was originally written in Israel in a time when the harvest was monumentally important. And if you're thinking, well, yeah, they were an agricultural-based economy, sure it was important. You're right, but it's more than that. There are at least 3 tiers of impact to the size of the harvest that you would gather. Number 1, the first fruits or the first part of the harvest was given as a tithe. You would bring it to the temple and it would fund the work of ministry. It would fund the work of the priests. So the more you made, the more successful you were, the larger your harvest, the better able you were to participate in that. It's the same way today. Jesus designed his church to be a crowd-funded organization. Everything that we do, all of our ministry, everything that we are a part of, both locally and around the world, is fueled and funded by your generosity. So if you give to Autumn Ridge, hear me, thank you. And for those of us who are here, and maybe you're in the room or you're watching online and you're starting to adopt this way of thinking, you're thinking, this is my church, these are my people, you like being a part of what's going on here, you like what we're doing, and you've never given, we would invite you. We do invite you. Would you give financially as a way of joining in and being a partner in ministry with us? This is the first tier of impact. The second tier of impact was part of the harvest was left over in the field for those in need. This was God's law. You don't harvest the full field. You leave some of it left out. And it was a way for those in need to be able to engage in meaningful work to provide for themselves and their families. For people who did not have access to a field to farm for themselves, this was not food for nothing. It was a dignity-honoring approach where people could go and do meaningful work and harvest food and stuff in the field in a way that was supported by those who had greater resources. And some people might think of this as a way to fund social justice efforts. It's probably best described as a way to fund community well-being. And third, the harvest fed and funded the family. You would keep everything from a harvest you needed to feed your family, the people who depended on you, your livestock, all of that. And the expectation is that you would sell the rest at a reasonable price. Don't hoard it and don't manipulate the market. And so there's a lot riding on the son's response. Are you going to shovel what you have to shovel to have a large harvest? And I don't know what label to put on this, how to describe this, but I think of this as God's approach to kind of a socially minded capitalism or spiritually minded capitalism. And these are the wise words of a father to a son that says, do what you got to do. Take stock of what you have. Get honest about the people who are counting on you, who are impacted by your choice. Decide what you want and do whatever you have to do. Invest in it however you have to invest. Shovel what you got to shovel. Get as messy as you've got to get to have a larger harvest. So here's my question. What's our harvest? What are we about? What is the outcome that we are for that impacts more people than we can count or name? It's summed up in our mission statement. We exist to lead people to be fully devoted followers of Jesus. This is why we exist. This is our purpose. What kind of harvest should we go for? If it's possible to have a larger harvest, should we do whatever is necessary to have a larger harvest? As you think about that, as you mull that over, I want to draw out another implication of Proverbs 14:4. Where there are no oxen, the stable stays clean, but you need the strength of an ox for a large harvest. It's this. Adults submit their preferences to a purpose that's greater than themselves. I don't know anyone who says, yeah, I love shoveling ox excrement. I prefer it. Nobody prefers that. But adults submit their preferences to a purpose that's greater than themselves. Does anybody ever feel a tension between this and this? Just me? Anybody else ever feel that tension? What do you do when there's a tension there? This right here is the front lines and the battle between being a wise church and a foolish church. This is the front lines and the battleground of being wise people and foolish people. And the more you lean into this, I think you'll discover this is serious and it's not simple. And right now, this is playing out in our city and it's playing out in our church, primarily in how we respond to the ongoing demands and realities of COVID and things like mask mandates. And the reason that it's not simple is because there are a variety of ways to approach the very real dilemma of COVID. There are a variety of probably valid ways to think about this. And let me just list a few. There might be more, but let me list a few. We could approach it medically, politically, economically, socially, or through the perspective of mental and emotional health. Every single one of us in the room, every single one of you watching online, one of these you prefer to elevate as more important than the rest. Now, there's at least one more that I think we should consider. It's Jesus and his kingdom. And today, I'm going to ask you to do two things. Would you be willing to do these two things? Number one, just whichever one of these things you prefer to elevate highest, which is fine, would you just name it? Would you get honest with yourself about what is the thing that you elevate the highest? And here's the second thing I want you to do. Would you be willing to take that approach and subordinate it to your allegiance to Jesus and his kingdom? One of our church's values is move towards the messes. So can we roll up our sleeves and get a little messy right now? Is that okay? You guys want to do that? What does it mean if you are a person that says, Rick, this is the approach that I prefer, that I think should be at the highest? And what do you do if you're a person who says, because of this, I want to wear a mask, I think other people ought to wear a mask. As a matter of fact, I'm really a big fan of a mask mandate. What do you do if that is your perspective, you prefer that? What does it mean to take that and subordinate it to allegiance to Jesus and his kingdom? Well, it means that whenever you encounter people who see it differently than you, you choose not to violate love and wisdom. And however way you engage, and all the variety of different ways you would engage people who don't share your viewpoint, you just say, I'm not going to violate love and gentleness and patience and kindness. I refuse to be condescending and shaming. And because I value the dignity of people who disagree with me, I'm going to voluntarily try to see it from their viewpoint, even though I disagree, because I want to understand them. What if it's one of these others that you prefer to elevate at the highest? And because of that, you bristle against a mask mandate. What does it mean to take your preferred approach and subordinate it to allegiance to Jesus and his kingdom? Well, it means whenever you encounter and engage people who disagree with you, people who don't share your resistance, that you refuse to violate love and wisdom. In all the different ways that you encounter and engage them, you refuse to violate love, gentleness, patience, and kindness. You refuse to be condescending and shaming because you value the dignity of the other person. You voluntarily choose to do your best to see it from their viewpoint, even though you disagree, because you want to understand them. That's what this means. So here's my question. As a church, are we paying the price for being wise? Are we paying the price for not being wise? I'm going to let you answer that. Let me just tell you what we're going to do. We're not going to use our platform to elevate any of these over our allegiance to Jesus and his kingdom. This is always going to win out. And as your pastor, it's my intent to not tell you what to think. It's my intent to not tell you what to do. That's not my approach to leadership. And in this time, and we're trying to navigate this, everybody's got to do what they think is wisest and best for themselves and their family. We honor that. We're not judging each other around here. But if there's anyone in the room or anyone watching online and you've made this decision or you're thinking about making this decision, I'm not going to be around these people anymore. I'm not going to join them anymore. I'm turning my back on them because I don't like what they choose and it's different from what I choose. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I will say I think you got some wrestling to do. On Friday, I had a cup of coffee with our chief of police, and I like him. I think we're privileged to have a guy like that in our community, and we were just talking about how's our community doing really? How's our city doing really? And he shared with me all the things that he looks at as indicators and all the things that they have to respond to as a police department. He said everything they look to, that they measure for how well the city is doing versus crisis. He said everything is trending up and in the wrong direction. We're hurting. Our city's hurting. People around us are hurting. Who are going to be the people who reap a harvest of love and kindness and gentleness and patience? It will only be the people. It will only be the people who choose love and kindness and gentleness and patience, even when it's difficult. COVID is just one way that we could talk about preferences. There are all kinds of different preferences we have, aren't there? I bet you have preferences about anything and everything. If my wife were here, she would say, I have preferences about anything and everything. And when we talk about church, you got preferences, I got preferences. And so I decided, let's just do a little something fun and interactive. I want you to take out your phone. You can do it on your phone. Take out pen and paper. I want you to list out all the preferences you have for church, all right? I'm going to throw a timer up on the screen. Take 60 seconds. You're going to write down all the preferences you have for church. Go. All right, I don't know what's on your list. I made a list of categories. Let me share with you the categories that I thought of. Service times, style of music, volume of music. You guys got preferences about volume of music, right? Some of you really don't mind telling me about it either. Love you. Size of church, in person or digital, temperature at church, style of preaching. Do kids attend with parents or do kids participate in kids ministry? How often do we take communion? Do we take an offering, don't take an offering? Dress up, dress down, Sunday school or small group? We all got preferences. And here's the thing about all of your preferences and all of my preferences. Probably 99% of them are not wrong. There's nothing wrong with any of the preferences you have or I have. And yet adults understand this. Sometimes our preferences stop serving our purpose. That there are times that our preferences, even though the preference isn't wrong, it actually contradicts what we're trying to achieve. And it's something that's going to happen to 100% of us eventually. What do you do in that moment? Adults submit their preferences to a purpose that's greater than themselves. And I want to suggest to you right now that wisdom is saying to us, always opt for our purpose over our preference. Even when we don't know how our preference might stop serving our purpose, even before we could imagine how that could ever come to be, that our purpose, which is to lead people to be fully devoted followers of Jesus, we always opt for that, and we always opt for a larger harvest, even if our preferences don't support that. We would just say our purpose wins over our preferences. And I've been doing this long enough to know that there are people who are listening right now, maybe watching right now, and you're waiting for me to make an announcement. that's going to disrupt your preferences. Ha! Here it is. It's not happening. I don't have one. There's no like secret thing to unveil. That's not why we're talking about this. This is 0% about responding to a theoretical change. It's 100%. It's only about whether or not we are going to adopt this as our mindset. So I just want to ask, would you be willing to pre-decide? What kind of relationship do you want to have between your preferences and your purpose? Would you be willing to pre-decide? What is the relationship going to be between what you prefer and our church's purpose? And as you think about that, I want to read to you something from the Apostle Paul. It's been very meaningful to me. 2 Corinthians 5, he said, "For Christ's love compels us, because we are all convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died." And what this means is when you trust in Christ, we identify with his death on the cross, that we are dying to our old way of life, and we also identify with his resurrection, and we live to something new. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for who? Say it like you mean it. They should no longer live for who? Themselves, but for... We don't live for what we want, our preferences, our purpose, our agenda. We live for what he wants, his purpose, his preference, his agenda. We live for him because he died for us and was raised again. If the Apostle Paul was here, I think he'd be totally okay with us summarizing this in this way. Adults, people who are wise, adults exchange their agenda for Jesus' agenda. And so this is another kind of lean in, let's get vulnerable with ourselves kind of moment. I'm going to put a statement up on the screen, and I want you to respond emotionally to it. You don't have to do it out loud. You don't have to tell me, but I just want you to be honest with you. What's your response to this? We'll do anything short of sin to reach people with the gospel. We'll do anything short of sin to reach people with the gospel. Remember, this word right here means to miss the mark. We're never going to knowingly and willingly violate wisdom. We're never going to knowingly and willingly violate God's good moral boundaries. We're never going to knowingly and willingly violate truth and what his word says. When it comes to having a larger harvest, what's on the list of things that you say, I won't do that? This is my list. It's one word: sin. Everything else is on the table. If you've been around for a little while, you've probably heard me talk about this before. We're a city of 115,000 people. On any given Sunday, this is pre-COVID numbers, on any given Sunday, over 100,000 people not engaged with any church. The numbers are worse now. What do we do? Let's do a little thought experiment. You guys know how a thought experiment works? You just assume the parameters of the experiment are true and you decide how you would respond. And let's make this serious, but also fun. Thought experiment. If we could guarantee that if we change something, it wouldn't be our preference, but it wouldn't be sin. It's not what we would want, but it's not wrong. But if we made this change, we would reach 25,000 people in our city. 25,000 people would get baptized and say, I want to give my life to Christ, and they would grow in their relationship with him. Would you have to know what that thing is before deciding to do it? Or would you just say, my purpose is so important, the harvest is so important, I'm in even if I don't know what it is? This is the thought experiment. Remember, this is serious, but it can also be fun. What if I told you we could reach 25,000 people in this city that come to know Christ and grow in their relationship with him if we changed our weekend services, all of our music to polka? Would you do that? Would you be a part of that? Because I tell you what, if you could guarantee me that changing all of our praise and worship to polka, you know what I am? I'm a polka pastor now. I don't know how to play this thing, but I figured it out. Right? Are you in? Would you join me in that? Now, I don't have any polka preferences. You'll never find me listening to polka. It's not on my Spotify playlist. I'm not against it. This is not my jam. But if you could guarantee me that we could reach 25,000 people by switching to praise and worship through polka, I will find a way to love it. And I bet you would too. You know why? Because when you love the harvest, you'll do whatever it takes to grow the harvest. I'm just curious, by the way, are there any polka fans in here? Anybody? We got a couple. All right, I got bad news. There's no data to suggest that polka helps us reach anybody, so we're not changing the polka. But hear me on this. Hear me on this. The churches in Rochester who get to be a part of reaching the people of Rochester are the churches that will pick their purpose over their preferences. The churches in Rochester that get to join Jesus in what he's doing to reach people and change their lives will be the churches that pick their purpose over their preferences. It will be the churches who say, whatever it costs to be wise, I'm doing that. Could we end here? Would you be willing to do this? To pre-decide to live with your preferences, not for your preferences? Live with them, but don't live for them. As I look around this room, I know that there are people in this room who are in love with Jesus. You know why we love him? Because he first loved us. Not only did he give up his preferences, he gave up his rights and his privileges to serve us in our need, to pay the price for our sin, to atone for us, to set us free. And if you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, and for whatever reason, the reason that we want you to see him and behold him is so that you can know how great and how wide and how marvelous his love is. If you know what it's like to be caught in the tangled mess of moral consequences, we want you to know what it's like to be set free by him. And so for those of us who would say, Rick, I'm a follower of Jesus, could we do this together? Could we take all of our preferences and hold them like this? And take our purpose and hold on to it like this? Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, you are gentle, you are kind, you are good, you are just, you are holy. You respond to sin, but you choose to make Jesus pay for it so we don't have to, and all we have to do is trust in him. God, we thank you for that. God, would you use our church? Would you use us as people who help many, many more people come to know that? And it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.